Hey guys, welcome in, welcome in. Mr. Gooby. I am currently in the end right now, trying to get back to the overworld because I'm going to be trying to do some trial chambers and hopefully I can get a base score. Cross your fingers. But other than that, the stories I'll be reading are pretty freaking scary, I will say, and pretty crazy. So sit back, grab a snack, relax, and I hope you guys enjoy. Let's get straight into it. This is going to be story one. The God I Met in the Woods. I'm writing this because no one else will listen anymore. I went to the police first, then the park rangers, then anyone who would return my calls. They took my statement, asked the usual questions, and eventually stopped contacting me altogether. No bodies were found, no evidence was logged. According to them, nothing I described existed. They told me trauma can distort memory. One detective suggested I take time away from the internet. I know what I saw. I know what happened to those people who went missing with me. I'm writing this here because I don't know where else to turn to. If this reaches someone who understands what I'm describing, or who has heard of similar things, please read carefully. I need to know if what we encountered has a name. My friends and I had been hiking during the spring last year on the Appalachian Trail for 3 days by then, staying on the main path except for a short, clearly marked offshoot our map listed as a scenic detour. It wasn't remote enough to feel dangerous. Still within sights of blazes on the trees. Still close enough that we passed other hikers earlier in the morning. There were five of us. Ethan insisted on leading, like he always did. Caleb lagging behind, stopping to take photos. Marcus complaining about his boots. Lena kept track of our progress and double checking the map every hour. No one felt uneasy. No one suggested turning back. That's what makes this so hard to explain. We weren't chasing rumors or shortcuts. We weren't drunk or reckless. We didn't cross any boundaries that weren't already marked and approved. Even the forest grew quieter. We treated it like it was nothing more than a change in the elevation or weather. What I'm saying is that we weren't lost when they found us. The trees went quiet at first, not suddenly, just gradually, like the forest was holding its breath. Then, when all things seemed to go silent, Caleb asked Lena if she heard that. Hear what? I thought. It was dead quiet. It felt as if we were in the empty void of space. A whistle erupted in the air, sounded like a shoehorn. I'm not sure how to explain it, but it wasn't natural. They stepped out between the trunks, six of them at least, dressed in a layered gray cloth stipped with ash. Their faces were smeared with it too, streaked deliberately like war paint or mourning. We all froze in place. Ethan had no clue what to do or say. Neither did I. They carried bows that now I look back on and I realize they were made of bones. One of them carried a hatchet with a dry redness on the sharp end. One of them stepped forward and pressed two fingers into a bow at his waist. He smeared ash across Ethan's face, then Marcus, then Lena. When he reached me, I tried to pull back. The nomad's eyes were hollow. I don't know how else to describe it. There was no reflection in them, no hint of light. Looking into them felt like I was staring down a dark, hollow pit, and from somewhere deep inside that darkness, something was staring back. We attempted to walk away. They started getting agitated and spoke in what we had assumed was their old native tongue. Hands like iron, they rounded us like cattle. Too strong. One of them struck Caleb in the ribs with a staff carved in spirals, and he dropped instantly, gasping. When Lena screamed, they shoved what looked like raw meat into her mouth until she gagged and started to convulse within minutes. They tied us up and forced us to wherever they called home. Stones lined it, carved with symbols that made my vision swim if I stared too long. The nomad that was carrying Lena, who still looked lifeless, headed the opposite direction at a fork in the path. Ethan and Caleb bolted without warning. Ethan wasn't as quick. He didn't make it 10 steps before something struck him from behind. I never saw what hit him. I just heard the sound of stone meeting his skin. They dragged him by his feet. They didn't rush. They didn't shout. They knew where they were going. By the time we reached the clearing, I failed to make peace with my God. I kept telling myself we'll be fine, that somehow we would be set free. I held on to that thought like a prayer. The clearing waited at the end of the path like it has always been there. Something stood in the center. At first, I thought it was a statue, some kind of shrine gone wrong. But statues don't slither, do they? It was tall, but not upright. Its body sagged under its own weight, flesh folding and unfolding in slow, nauseating patterns. Skin tones didn't match, didn't agree with each other, like pieces taken from different things and forced into coexistence. Some of it moved independently, twitching or breathing out a rhythm. Its flesh was wrong, not its own. The ash people knelt. The thing's voice didn't travel through the air. It boomed inside my head, ancient and vast, speaking in a language that somehow translated itself into meaning. The images it forced into my mind were unbearable, land flourishing unnaturally, sickness erased, bloodlines continuing long past their time, prosperity twisted into something obscene. One of you will hold the Messiah. One may carry it. The rest will. Ethan didn't hesitate. He stepped forward before anyone could stop him. He had always been like that, the first into danger, first to volunteer when things get ugly. He spat toward the thing, cursed it, called it perversions, told it he wasn't afraid. The thing accepted him eagerly. Its flesh parted, not a mouth, but the way a body is opening during a surgery. A slow, deliberate healing, layers peeling back as if it expected him. The cavity beneath pulsed wetly, alive with motion. From within that pit, tendrils erupted, ropes of mismatched skin, slick and twitching, guts that had belonged to not a single creature shot out and wrapped around Ethan's arms and torso, yanking him forward with impossible strength. He screamed, not in fear but in agony. The thing screamed too. At first, it sounded like a wounded animal layered atop another one. Deer, bear, bird, their cries overlapping, warping, tearing through the air. Then the sound shifted, tearing, reshaping until they became human. My best friend was consumed, his body pulled apart and folded inward, absorbed into the unending mass of flesh, as if he had never been whole to begin with. The ash people bowed their heads and chanted, "He was not worthy," one of the female nomads had said calmly, as though announcing the weather. I shook where I knelt. There was no chance, no mercy to be found here. My eyes remained fixed on its heavy tissue near the center of the mess. Partially submerged and blinking slowly was an eye and facial features I recognized. Caleb's. I knew it by the scar above the brow, by the way it struggled to focus, by the silent panic trapped behind it. Any hope I had left died in that moment. There was no escape. There was no savior coming. There was only a God made of flesh. I don't remember choosing to stand, but I did. I rose from where I had been trembling and stepped forward. I don't know whether it was surrender or inevitability. I gave myself to the flesh deity. What had happened during my assimilation is unclear. My memory fractures there, dissolving into sensation without shape or language. I woke up at the edge of the trail, alone, like nothing had happened. Weeks had passed, then months. Lena is dead. She took her own life. Marcus won't answer my messages. I wake up with ash underneath my nails. Sometimes, in my dreams, I hear a voice that's not my own. I don't know who the blessing truly chose. The authority released their conclusions last week. An accident, they said. Exposure, panic. A series of poor decisions made by inexperienced hikers. The reports mentioned hypothermia, animal interference, and the unreliable memory under extreme stress. They ruled the rest as unrecoverable, a word that sounds cleaner than the truth. The news ran with it for days. A short segment, stock footage of the trees, a reminder to stay on the marked trails. None of it's true. I recognize the lies because they are incomplete, because they end where the real story begins, because they cannot explain the symbols I still see when I close my eyes, or why ash keeps appearing in places I've never been since. They say nothing unusual was found. I know better. I stood before it. I hear it speak. I felt it choose. You can call it delusion if you want. That's what they said. That's what the paperwork says. But delusions don't leave scars. And they don't wake up in the middle of the night whispering promises in a voice that isn't yours. I know what happened. And the fact that no one believes me doesn't make it any less real. It only means it's still hungry. If you've seen the symbols, hear the language, or know why they choose outsiders, I need to know. Because the authorities won't help. And whatever they served didn't stop with them. And I don't know how much longer I can last. Because something is growing inside me. I can feel it slithering, coiling beneath my skin, growing day by day, waiting, eager to fulfill its prophecy to the world. Oh my god, I don't even know what I would do in that situation. Realistically, what do you even do? Like I would probably check myself into a psych ward or something. That's terrifying. That story was so good. All right, on to the next one, guys. All right, this is going to be story 2. The ranger gave us one strict rule: never use an axe on the black bark trees. My friend broke it, and now I have a human skull in my backpack. This all started yesterday morning. My two friends and I planned a 3-day backpacking trip deep into the ancient protected forest region. We wanted to get far away from the city, lose cell service, and just hike. We drove for 6 hours until the paved roads turned into gravel and the gravel turned into dirt. We parked at the main trailhead, which was located right next to a small wooden ranger station. A ranger stepped out of the building as we were strapping on our packs. He was an older man wearing a pristine green uniform and a wide brimmed hat. He smiled, walked over to us, and asked us to see our back county permits. We handed them over, he reviewed the paperwork, checked our names against a clipboard, and handed them back. You boys have a solid route plan? The ranger said, pointing to the trail map my oldest friend was holding. You are headed into the oldest sector of the park. The canopy gets incredibly dense up there. You will lose the sun early, so make sure you pitch your tents before the late afternoon. We brought headlamps, my oldest friend replied. We plan to rush pretty far in today. The ranger nodded, but his expression grew serious. He folded his hands and leaned against the wooden rail of the station porch. I need to give you a primary rule for this specific sector, the ranger said. His tone was entirely professional but very strict. As you get deeper into the valley, you are going to see a specific type of tree. They are massive, and you have entirely black bark. They look like they have been scorched by fire, but are completely natural. They are an endangered species of flora and are incredibly fragile. We will not mess with them, I told him. I need to be very clear, the ranger continued, looking each of us directly in the eyes. Never use an axe on the black bark trees. Never cut them down. Never carve your initials into them, and never try to harvest them for firewood. If you need to build a campfire, gather dead wood from the ground only. Do you all understand? Of course, my other friend said. We respect the park rules. Dead wood from the ground only. We will not touch the black trees. Good, the ranger said, smiling again. Have a safe hike, boys. We left the trailhead and walked into the woods. The hike was challenging. The elevation gain was steep, and the terrain was covered in thick roots and loose rocks. The deeper we walked into the forest, the older the environment felt. The trees grew wider, and their branches overhead interlocked, blocking out the blue sky. Around noon, we saw the first black barked tree. The ranger had not exaggerated. The tree was gigantic. The trunk was easily 10 feet wide, and the bark was deep, matted black. It stood out completely against the brown and green colors of the surrounding forest. As we pushed deeper into the valley, We saw more of them, scattered among the normal pines and oaks like dark pillars. We hiked for another 4 hours. We were exhausted, sweating, and ready to stop for the day. We found a flat clearing near a small creek and decided to make camp. As we were unrolling our tents, the weather shifted. The temperature dropped sharply. Dark gray clouds rolled over the canopy, and suddenly, violent rainstorm began, so the water came down in heavy sheets, soaking us to the bone within seconds. We scrambled to get the tents up. We threw our gears inside and huddled in the nylon shelters. Shivering in our wet clothes, the storm lasted for 2 hours. It battered the tents and turned the campsite into a muddy swamp. When the rain finally stopped, the sun was already setting. The forest plunged into a dark, freezing twilight. We crawled out of our tents, our teeth chattering. The temperature was dropping fast, and we were completely soaked. We knew needed fire immediately to dry our clothes and prevent hypothermia. Spread out and find dead wood, my oldest friend instructed, his voice shaking from the cold. Look for anything under the dry brushes. We spent 20 minutes searching the area around the campsite. It was useless. The storm had saturated everything. Every branch on the ground was soaked through, crumbling into wet mush when we tried to snap it. My other friend walked back to the center of the camp holding a small camping hatchet. He looked angry and completely miserable. There is nothing dry on the ground, he said, gripping the hatchet tightly. Everything is completely waterlogged. We are not going to get a fire started with that wet bark. We have to keep looking, I told him. Maybe under the rock overhanging near the creek? No, he snapped, pointing the hatchet toward the edge of the clearing. I am freezing. We need dry wood from inside of a trunk. He pointed directly at a massive black barked tree standing just 10 yards away from our tents. The ranger specifically told us not to touch those trees, I argued, stepping in front of him. He said they are an endangered species. He will get us a massive fine. I don't care about fine, my friend argued back, pushing past me. I care about not freezing to death tonight. The tree is huge. Taking one chunk out of the side is not going to kill it, and the wood inside it will be completely dry. I'm doing it. I tried grabbing his shoulder, but he shook me off. He walked right up to the massive black trunk and raised the hatchet high above his shoulder and swung it forward with all of his strength. The steel blade bit deeply into the black bark. My friend grunted, pulling the hatchet handle downward to pry the wood loose. Blade popped free. Thick, red blood poured from the cut. It was a deep, dark crimson liquid. It spilled out the gash in the bark, running down the black trunk and pulling on the exposed roots. The metallic smell of copper instantly filled the air. My friend dropped the hatchet into the mud. He backed away, staring at his hands, which were now speckled with red drops. What did you do? My oldest friend whispered, stepping backward. The forest changed immediately. The sounds of the woods completely vanished. The crickets stopped chirping. The frogs in the creek stopped croaking. The wind died down entirely. The silence was absolute, pressing against my ears. A loud rustle broke in the silence. It came from the canopy directly above the bleeding trees. We looked up. Something dropped from the high branches. It landed on the ground heavy, sickening thud, crouching low on the muddy roots. It was a creature that defied any natural biology. The lower half of its body resembled a deer, with the backward bending joints, coarse brown fur, and sharp, splinted hooves. But the upper half was entirely different. The torso was stretched, pale and hairless, resembling a starving human. The arms were incredibly long, ending in hands with elongated, multi jointed fingers. The head was the worst part. It possessed a massive, sprawling rack of jagged antlers, but the face was a blank slab of pale skin. It had no eyes, it had no nose. The only feature on its face was a wide, vertical slit that opened to reveal rows flat, grinding teeth. The creature stood up. It towered over us, standing at least 8 feet tall. It turned its blank face toward the bleeding trunk. It reached out with a long hand and touched the red liquid. It tilted its head back and released a sound. It sounded like a distorted, grating siren full of pure rage. Run! I shouted. We scattered in 3 different directions. Panic completely took over my mind. I sprinted into the dark bush, pushing blindly through bushes and low hanging branches. I heard the crashing sounds of the creature charging behind me. I dove behind a large moss covered boulder and dropped to the ground, pressing my face into the wet dirt. I held my breath, trying to calm my racing heart. I looked towards the ferns. My oldest friend was running about 50 yards to my left. He tripped over a root and fell hard onto his hands and knees. The creature was standing in the center of the clearing when my friend fell. His hand snapped a dry branch at the ground. The creature's head instantly snapped toward the exact direction of the sound. It locked into the noise, then dropped onto all fours and launched itself towards my friend with terrifying speed. My friend scrambled to his feet and ran deeper into the forest, leading the creature away from my position. I knew I could not run. Forest floor was covered in wet leaves and snapping twigs. If I tried to move through the brush, the creature would hear me and hunt me down. I needed a place to hide. I looked back at the campsite. The bleeding black tree was still standing there. I noticed a massive dark opening at the base of the trunk, hidden between the 2 spiraling roots. The center of the tree was hollow. I crawled on my stomach, moving agonizingly slow to avoid making any noise. I crossed the mud, reached the roots, and squeezed my body into the hollow opening of the black trunk. The inside of the tree was pitch black. The air smelled intensely of dry blood and old dirt. The space was tight, barely large enough for me to sit cross legged. I leaned my back against the curved wooden wall. As I shifted my weight, my hands brushed against something cold and metal resting on the dirt floor. I pulled my hands back. I sat completely still for a moment, listening to the distant sounds of the creature crashing through the woods. It was far away, chasing my friend. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I turned the flashlight setting on and immediately covered the lens with my fingers, letting only a tiny sliver of light escape into the hollow space. I pointed the dim light at the floor between my boots. Resting in the dirt was an old hunting knife. The blade was heavily rusted, and the wooden handle was warped and decaying leather. Carefully picked it up, carved deeply into the bottom of the wood handle with 3 letter initials. I recognized them immediately. They matched the name tag the ranger wore on his uniform at the trailhead. I pointed the sliver of light back down at the dirt, underneath the spot where the knife had been resting. A round white object was partially buried in the soil. I used my free hand to brush the loose dirt away. It was a human skull. The bone was stained brown from the earth. I stared at it in horror. I noticed a massive, straight crack running directly down the center of the forehead. The bone had been completely cleaved open. I held the rusted knife up against the skull. I aligned the blade with the crack. The width and the thickness of the blade perfectly matched the damage to the bone. I hear a loud crunch sound outside the tree. A hoof step on the roots. The creature had returned. I immediately turned my phone light off and plunged back into the darkness. I clamped both my hands tightly over my mouth and nose to muffle the sound of my own breathing. Then I squeezed my eyes shut. The creature paced slowly around the outside of the trunk. I could hear its hooves scraping against the mud and it sniffing the air, the wet, raspy sound of its breath echoing in the quiet forest. It stopped pacing and then stood directly in front of the hollow opening. I waited for it to reach inside and grab me. Instead, the creature spoke. It used human words, but the voice was wrong. It sounded like multiple voices layered over one another, speaking in a raspy, stolen tone. He fills the roots with the broken ones. The creature spoke, the voice vibrating through the woods of the trees. He digs the hollows, leaves the meat for the dirt, and hides his sins in my skin. I kept my hands clamped over my mouth. Tears stung my eyes. I was listening to the monster talk to itself. He tells the travelers to leave the black bark alone. The creature continued, its voice dripping with hatred. He knows the rules. He knows if the bark bleeds, I must protect the grove and hunt the ones who spill the sap. He uses my anger to guard his grave, to make me the killer of the curious. The creature scrapes its hooves angrily against the dirt. Cannot leave the shadows, it whispered. I cannot walk the path to his wooden health. He wears the carved bones, the wards on his chest. The dead cannot touch him. I cannot see him. He is safe from my teeth, while he fills my trees with this rot. I sat in the dark. I knew I could not stay in the tree forever. I had no food, no water, and my friends were either dead or lost in the woods. If I tried to run, the blind creature would hear me and kill me. There was only one option. I slowly pulled my hand away from my mouth, took a deep breath. I could stop him, I said aloud. The creature instantly stopped moving. The silence returned. I slowly crawled forward, pushed my head and my shoulder out of the hollow opening, then stood up in the mud, keeping my hands empty and raised in the air. The creature was standing right in front of me. It was towering, its blank face angled slightly downward, listening to my exact position. I found the skull, I said, keeping my voice steady, though my entire body was shaking. Found his knife. I know what the ranger is doing to you. I know he uses you to hide his murders. The creature did not move. It breathed slowly. If you kill me, its secrets stay hidden, I told the creature. He will keep bringing bodies here, and will keep using your trees. But if you let me walk away, I will take the evidence. I will take it to the people who can arrest him, so we can bring him to justice. And he will never bury another body in your grove again. The creature took a step closer. The massive antlers bolted out of the moonlight above. It leaned its face down until it was inches from my own. I could smell the earth on its breath. It slowly opened its mouth. The vertical slit parted, jaw unhinged, stretching incredibly wide. The throat opened into a dark, massive cavern. I looked inside its mouth, and I saw them, the faces of the dead, pale, translucent human faces embedded into the dark tissues of the creature's throat. The faces opened their mouths, and they spoke to me in unison. The Green Man keeps a record. The faces whispered, the voices echoing directly into my mind. He keeps a book of names. He keeps the rings of from our fingers and the plastic cards with our pictures. Where? I asked the faces. Where does he keep them? In his wooden house, the faces replied. Underneath the floor. Third wooden board from the iron stove. Board is loose. Box is metal. Take the book. Take the rings. Show the world his sins. The creature closed his mouth. The vertical slit sealed shut, hiding the faces in the dark. It took a step backward, then turned around, walking slowly away from the bleeding tree, disappearing into the dark canopy of the forest. It was letting me go. It had accepted the deal. I dropped to my knees. I reached into the hollow trunk and grabbed the rusted hunting knife and the fractured human skull. I unzipped my backpack and placed both items securely inside. I stood up and began walking through the woods. I walked carefully, placing my feet softly on the ground. I found my friends an hour later. They were hiding together inside a deep rocky cavern near the creek. They had stayed completely silent, which is why the creature had not found them. They were terrified and shivering, but they were unharmed. I told them we had to leave immediately. I did not explain the deal I had just made. I just told them the creature was gone and we had to hike back to our cars. We walked through the forest all night. We navigated by the moonlight and the compass on my phone. We reached the trailhead just as the sun was starting to rise. The small wooden ranger station was dark and empty. We threw all of our gear into the trunk of our car and drove away from the state park as fast as the gravel roads would allow us. I reached the nearest town about an hour later. It was small, a quiet place with a single main street. I parked the car directly in front of the local police station. I'm going in, I told my friends, grabbing my backpack from the floor. I have evidence for murders. I'm going to tell them everything. I walked up the concrete steps to the glass double doors of the police station. I reached for the handle, but I stopped. I looked through the glass into the lobby. The ranger was standing inside. He was wearing his pristine green uniform, holding a cup of coffee, and he was laughing loudly. Sitting around the front desk with a local sheriff and three deputies, they were all drinking coffee and smiling, joking with the ranger. I looked closer. Hanging around the ranger's neck was a small, carved piece of white bone tied to a leather string. It was the ward, the charm that had protected him from the creature in the dead. I looked at the sheriff. He was wearing the exact same carved bone charm around his neck. Looked at the three deputies. Every single one of them had a carved bone charm resting around their uniform shirts. My blood ran completely cold. Backed away from the glass door, then turned around, walked down the steps, and got back into my car. Drive, I told my oldest friend who was sitting in the driver's seat. Just drive out of this town right now. We have been driving for 2 hours. We are currently parked outside a diner near the interstate. I am holding the backpack on my lap. The skull and the rusted knife are sitting inside it right now. I know exactly where the ledger and the trophies are hidden in the ranger's house, under the third floorboard by the iron stove. The evidence is all there, waiting to be collected. But I cannot take this to the local cops. If I walk into that situation, they will see the skull, they will see the knife, and they will arrest me. Or worse, they will just drive me back out to the black bark trees and finish the job themselves. The blind creature kept its end of the deal, so I have to keep my end of the deal. Please, if anyone is reading this and has the authority to help, tell me what my next step should be. Wow, I was not expecting that. I was not expecting that twist. That was crazy. Oh my, that must have been terrifying. Running from that creature. Oh my god, that must have been terrifying. And then only to find out that the freaking forest ranger is a serial killer. Oh my gosh. And then all the cops and the deputies were in on it too. Oh my god, that makes it even worse. Oh, that makes it even worse. That was such a good story. Wow. Good job on him. That was an amazing story. Alright, guys. I hope you have enjoyed the stories and the video. If you did, please make sure to like and subscribe. I really do appreciate all of the support. Other than that, please stay safe out there, guys, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.